Modern Immortal Cultivation plus Academy plus Spiritual Revitalization, also known as the daily life of undergraduate students in Dandao Academy 500 years ago, with a Taoist saying he wanted to believe in science and then taking off with his sword, Blue Star officially entered the era of spiritual revival. Tang Jianyue is an undergraduate student in Dandao at Jiangnan University, and with only fire spirit roots, she cannot be considered outstanding. So Tang Jianyue, who once had the ambition of achieving success, stopped rolling up and began to put on airs. Let's take the civil service examination for retirement. Until that night, the leader of the Chongqing sect had a dream and insisted on accepting her as an apprentice, along with 6 unreliable senior brothers. 6 senior brothers each possessed unique skills and managed to turn Tang Jianyue's pill into an octagonal warrior. I've agreed, if you hit my senior brother, you can't hit me anymore. Chinese magic, Western magic. China steps on flying swords, while the West rides brooms. Quidditch competition, 1 by 1 faster. During the National College Cup, Tang Jianyue held a sword in her right hand and a talisman in her left, watching the wizard holding a wand, the ninja holding a silver knife, and the 6-winged angel bathing in the holy light across from her without any panic. Insufficient spiritual power, come and gather the pills. She is a danshio. Tang Jianyue, this is at Hogwarts. Don't use a crucible to cook hot pot. Tang Jianyue, this is at Sakura University. Don't recite the Great Compassion Mantra under the Ghost Curse contract. Tang Jianyue, you are the most borderless exchange student I have ever seen. Later, a sign was erected in the forbidden areas of various colleges. Tang Jianyue and dogs are not allowed to enter. Chapter 1. 500 years after the revival of spiritual energy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 days ago, Tang Jianyue advised her to quit her medical major and participate in the annual final college entrance examination. 3 days later, Tang Jianyue said that the Dandao profession advised him to quit, and he was as poor as a dog. Tang Jianyue has been in this world for 3 days now, and everything in this world has made her ponder. This world is no different from where she was before her death, the only difference is that sword cultivation and talismans can be seen everywhere. Tang Jianyue referred to it as the Blue Star after 500 years of spiritual revival. Before she came, her friends had a conversation about which major corresponded to in the cultivation world at that time. Tang Jianyue, who was studying traditional Chinese medicine, tentatively asked, Dan Xiu. At that time, her friend laughed and said, it said that Dan Xiu in the cultivation world is so rich that we've made a fortune. Aren't we? Tang Jianyue looked at the red stove in the shop window, then at the price marked under the stove, and silently shed tears of sadness in her heart. Scammer. Those who make money from Dan Xiu are all scammers. If possible, she really wants to put it back on and pinch that friend's neck to tell her that it's all a lie. Hey, Taoist friend, do you want it or don't you want it? The owner of the Dan stove impatiently urged. Tang Jianyue rummaged through her pockets and shook her head helplessly, don't do it anymore. Alchemy furnaces are used for refining, and iron boilers are also used for refining. If you can save, then save. This is also a helpless move. When Tang Jianyue walked over, the original owner was just an orphan, and everything she did was done slowly. I did my best to be admitted to a key university in the country. This is also the result of the original owner paying 10 times more than others in exchange. However, her original first choice was sword cultivation, and she filled out a submission adjustment before eventually becoming a danshio. Dan Xiu is also quite good. Tang Jianyue believed that everything should be considered for the good. If Dan Xiu is good at taking the civil service exam, all ends will be in the civil service exam, even in this world today. Tang Jianyue returned to the orphanage and completed the relevant departure procedures. 3 days ago, she turned 18 and received an admission letter, so she can now rely on herself. Besides, the original owner has worked a bit and saved up a little bit over the years. A little bit, at most enough to buy a small fraction of an alchemy furnace. She was tidying up in the room when the administrator knocked on the door and said, "See the moon." Tang Jianyue opened the door with doubts in her heart. The administrator's aunt looked a bit embarrassed and said, "Jianyue, haven't you always wanted to find your parents?" When she said this, Tang Jianyue remembered. The original owner uploaded his information and had been wanting to find his original family. As Tang Jianyue was pondering, she said again, "I'm sorry, Jianyue, there's still no news. Last time, it seemed like someone came over and said your information was very similar, but in the end, she said she apologized." She said a lot to comfort Tang Jianyue. "Auntie, actually I'm not very sad. It's pretty good to be alone, isn't it?" Tang Jianyue said as she packed her luggage. What Tang Jianyue said is true. What is sad about? Anyway, she has just arrived and there are many things she needs to worry about. Why bother with such things? After packing her luggage, Tang Jianyue picked up an admission letter placed on the table, which read, "Jiangnan University, majoring in Dandao. In this world, it depends on effort and talent. Some people are born to be the pride of heaven, with multiple attributes present. But Tang Jianyue only has one fire attribute. Previously, the original owner threatened to work hard to make up for his shortcomings and amazed everyone. If it had been 5 years ago, perhaps Tang Jianyue would have been so spirited. But now, after studying medicine for 5 years, she is really tired and just wants to put on a show. When the sky falls, there is a tall person standing on top of her. Whatever she likes, she needs to live a retirement life in advance. First, finish college, then take the civil service exam, and from then on, stay in a fixed unit until the end of time." So, Tang Jianyue, who was determined to show off, boarded the train to Jiangnan University. Why not take a flying boat? Because of poverty. Although this world is full of spiritual energy, there are also some ordinary people who do not even possess any attributes. Even low-level cultivators cannot fly in the sky. So, trains are really affordable and convenient. At night, Tang Jianyue lay on the bed and quickly fell asleep. As a former medical student, she lacks other skills, but her advantage is good sleep. In her dream, Tang Jianyue found herself sitting on a cattail. And across from her sat an old man with a white beard. He smiled kindly at Tang Jianyue and said, "I see that you have a unique bone and are a good cultivator. I have a set of martial arts here, he said and took out a large roll of bamboo slips. Tang Jianyue instinctively blurted out, "What kind of ghost? I've traveled through time, why do I still have such dreams?" The old man with white beard stopped his movements and looked at Tang Jianyue in confusion. Tang Jianyue rubbed her eyebrows and smiled bitterly in her heart. "I was still dreaming about studying after finishing the college entrance examination. How could I cross the time and come back to this kind of thing?" The old man was very kind and continued holding the bamboo slip, saying, "This is a peerless martial art, just join in." Bang! Grandpa's movements froze again. He saw Tang Jianyue bump her head against the table. "Hiss, it hurts." Tang Jianyue rubbed her head inexplicably and said, "Why is this dream so real?" The old man took a deep breath and explained with effort, "This is not a dream, to be precise, this is your spiritual space." Tang Jianyue only understood the first half of the sentence, "It's not a dream." The old man saw that she understood and was ready to speak again. Unexpectedly, Tang Jianyue muttered, "You can still talk to me when you're asleep. Are the scams in the cultivation world so clever?" The old man kept smiling as much as possible, and just as he was about to continue, Tang Jianyue said again, "This old man." "Ah no, senior, where can I download the anti-fraud app for this world?" This time the old man couldn't hold his breath anymore. What a devil! When has it been so difficult for the head of the Chongqing sect to recruit an apprentice? Before, countless people had broken through the threshold to enter the sect. What is the current situation? Tang Jianyue yawned again and said, "Old man, if you're okay, I'll go to bed." After she left, the old man closed himself for a long time, and suddenly several voices appeared around him. "Master, what's your situation? Why did you let her leave before you finished speaking?" "That's right, master. Didn't you say you wanted to find a junior sister for us? Where's the junior sister?" The old man covered his ear and said, "Don't talk anymore. I didn't even understand. This girl's thoughts are not ordinary. If it weren't for the fact that we only found her to have spatial attributes in this world, we could only communicate with her. Otherwise, I would also like to change someone." "Don't, master. We want junior sister." "That's right, there are too many junior brothers, it's a bit annoying. Other families have junior sisters, so we should have them too." The old man snorted, "Who else can this girl worship if she doesn't worship me? This world has only revived its spiritual energy for 500 years, and there is nothing to teach her. Even her spatial attributes cannot be measured. She is destined to only worship our serious cultivation sect." Chapter 2. No, this is not about cultivating immortals. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After sleeping all night on the train, Tang Jianyue carried a suitcase and followed the navigation on her phone to the entrance of Jiangnan University. Even though this phone has a wider coverage and more functions, it is still called a phone. This is a technology belonging to the cultivation era. Jiangnan University is at least a key 211 university, and the lintel is installed very well. Tang Jianyue nodded in satisfaction when she saw the grand gate. As soon as she walked into the door with her admission letter in hand, a senior student from the school of Dandao enthusiastically ran over. If Tang Jianyue pretended not to see her secretly roll her eyes, then she was indeed quite enthusiastic. This senior sister doesn't have any objections to Tang Jianyue, it's just that she's really risking her life for those 2 or 3 credits. The junior sister she just picked up wants to stuff her house into a suitcase, and she still lives on the 6th floor. My senior sister thinks that even if it's physical training, it will be difficult to move that box, let alone this weak and helpless little Danshio. Moving a box almost exhausted her to death. Did you figure it out? She just wants some credits and doesn't want to risk her life. Tang Jianyue noticed her senior sister's gaze constantly scanning around her. She asked in confusion, "Senior sister, what are you looking for? Where's your luggage?" The senior sister walked up to Tang Jianyue's side. Tang Jianyue gently moved her arm and turned the suitcase from behind to in front of her. "Here," she said. The senior sister fell silent for a moment and then asked, "Just one?" Tang Jianyue nodded, but she still felt uneasy. Although some people only had one box, the weight was unimaginable. The senior rolled up her sleeves and lifted the box with a serious expression, only to find that it was much lighter than she had imagined. So her gaze towards Tang Jianyue this time was sincere and friendly. She helped Tang Jianyue walk up to the front with a box and waved to her, "Come on, Junior, I'll take you to the dormitory." Tang Jianyue glanced at the map and found that the dormitory was far away. Suddenly, she thought of something and asked her senior sister, "Senior sister, can you wield your sword if you don't have time for class?" The senior sister's expression became a bit strange. How to say, if you can fly the sword, it's possible, but many people in the Sword Academy are about to graduate and only reach the 7th level. You know, only those above the 7th level can wield the sword, so. She reluctantly spread out her hand. Only the master of swordsmanship could wield the sword. There were not many people like this in the Sword Training Academy, let alone other academies. Tang Jianyue was lost in thought as she walked on the road. She thought she could see many people flying swords in a world where spiritual energy was revived, but then she realized that it had only been revived for 500 years, and the cultivation system was indeed not very complete. My senior sister saw Tang Jianyue ask the same question earlier and said, "Junior sister, I forgot to ask earlier. What is your level?" Tang Jianyue said, "3rd level." The senior sister was stunned for a moment, then quickly realized, then you must be working very hard. Her meaning is that Tang Jianyue's level is a bit low, but she was able to get into Jiangnan University in this way, which can be said to be diligent enough to make up for her shortcomings. But as soon as she finished speaking, she felt something was not right, so she quickly made up for it and said, I didn't mean that. What I meant was that our Dan Xiu didn't value cultivation that much. As long as our spiritual power could keep up, it was enough. I know many Dan Xiu masters who are unable to cultivate themselves and then use pills to push their realm up hard. As soon as she finished speaking, Tang Jianyue suddenly felt the wind around her. She turned her head and saw a wild boar coming towards the position where she was standing with a snort. The senior sister quickly pulled Tang Jianyue behind her, and the two narrowly avoided the wild boar. After the wild boar ran over, there were still people chasing after it. The senior student hurriedly apologized in front of Tang Jianyue, I'm sorry, this junior sister, I'm not hurt, right? He saw Tang Jianyue shake his head, but didn't have time to say much. He quickly chased after the wild boar in front of him, shouting, Is there anyone with higher cultivation ahead? Stop it. It's my graduation thesis, and once I run away, I'll be finished. Tang Jianyue stared blankly at the desolate back of Shui Changyuan. The senior sister smiled at the situation and explained, at first glance, this seems to be a major in animal husbandry. Don't be afraid, it's not that difficult for us to graduate from Dan Xiu, just refine pills. If Tang Jianyue hadn't passed by the Dandao Academy, she would have almost believed her senior sister's nonsense. As soon as she walked to the entrance of the Dandao Academy, she heard a burst of explosions inside, and several fragments of the Dan stove fell at her feet. A person rushed out of the college, with a disheveled hair and a dusty face. Then, he stood in front of the door and opened his mouth, continuously emitting black smoke. In the end, he fell to the ground with his head down. A woman ran past Tang Jianyue and squatted next to Dan Xiu, senior brother, don't scare me. Tang Jianyue was stunned and then turned to look at her senior, this. The senior took a deep breath and comforted, don't be afraid, under normal circumstances, the alchemy furnace cannot explode. Tang Jianyue lowered her head and glanced at the admission notice in her hand, pondering whether she should change her major or not. She just wants to settle down until graduation and doesn't want to risk her life here. On the journey of cultivating immortality, life and death are unpredictable. What the ancient said is really true. Just as Tang Jianyue was struggling, another senior walked up to her with a sword hanging from her waist, most likely a sword cultivator. He looked at Tang Jianyue kindly and said, Junior, do you need a phone card? Tang Jianyue shook her head without hesitation and absolutely refused to take action. In her past life, she was tricked by selling phone cards when she went to college, but this time she definitely won't do it. The sword cultivator sighed and begged Tang Jianyue, let's get one. Tang Jianyue couldn't help but ask, Senior, are you all so humble in your sword cultivation? Shouldn't you proudly step on the flying sword and look at others like ants? Jian Xiu's face showed a hint of bitterness, Junior, poor. Tang Jianyue watched as he hesitated to speak. The senior thought she was wavering, so she quickly stepped forward to promote the phone card. However, Tang Jianyue only said, Senior, please rest well, sleep more at night, don't stay up late, otherwise it will be empty. Tang Jianyue only noticed that his face was dark yellow and his eyes were blue. As a graduate student in traditional Chinese medicine in her previous life, she could tell at a glance what was wrong with him, which was also her occupational disease. The expression on Jian Xiu's face became even more bitter, and he felt that there was no point in deceiving Tang Jianyue, so he held his phone card and searched for his next partner. Tang Jianyue was about to leave with her senior when suddenly someone patted her shoulder from behind and shouted, Jianyue. She turned her head and saw a little girl smiling at her. Tang Jianyue felt that the girl in front of her was somewhat familiar, and then searched through the original owner's memory before finally shouting, by Huan. She is a high school classmate of the original owner, and her relationship seems to be good, and coincidentally, Bai Huanhuan is also a Dandao major. As soon as Bai Huanhuan hugged Tang Jianyue's shoulder, she noticed the commotion ahead. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a sword cultivator chasing a talisman cultivator. Dao Xiu, feeling impatient and defeated, said, "If you have the ability to sell fake talismans, don't run away." Fu Xiu was panting heavily and said, "It's not big brother. The quality of my talismans is not a problem. Don't chase me anymore. I can't run anymore. You're also quite tired, right? Then you can return the spirit stone to me. No refund." So Dao Xiu took the knife and started chasing him again. Fu Xiu seemed really tired and couldn't run. He gritted his teeth and threw a thunder talisman at Dao Xiu. With a horizontal cut, the talisman paper was split in half, and half of it was blown in front of Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan by the wind. Half of the talisman paper still emitted thunder. Tang Jianyue murmured in silence, "Is there any mistake? This is not serious about cultivating immortals at all." Chapter 3. Mustard Bag. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan thought they couldn't escape, but a sudden light screen appeared in front of them, blocking the talisman paper. They looked aside and saw a girl in a green dress holding several talismans in her hand. It was she who had just thrown a defensive talisman in front of Tang Jianyue. The senior sister standing next to Tang Jianyue was somewhat surprised when she saw the girl in a green dress. The talisman paper was drawn well, she said. Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan exchanged a glance before thanking the woman together. The woman nodded lightly and walked over to her senior sister, taking out her admission letter and asking where her dormitory building was. The senior looked at the place she was going to, and at first glance, she looked a bit familiar. On the second glance, she took Bai Huanhuan's admission letter and said, "Coincidentally, the three of you live together." Bai Huanhuan is a social bull. Upon hearing this, she immediately ran to the girl in the green dress and reached out her hand, saying, "Hello, my name is Bai Huanhuan." She thought for a moment and then pulled Tang Jianyue in front of her. "She's my friend, Tang Jianyue." The girl in the green dress hesitated for a moment before grabbing Bai Huanhuan's hand and saying, "Yi family, Yi Qingshu." After hearing the woman's name, Bai Huanhuan took a cold breath and looked at her in surprise. "Genius Fu Master, Yi Qingshu." Yi Qingshu nodded indifferently. Tang Jianyue, on the other hand, looked confused. Please don't instill such complex interpersonal relationships in her after just 4 days of wearing them. Seeing this, Bai Huanhuan whispered in Tang Jianyue's ear and explained, "The Yi family of the 7 great immortal cultivation families is said to have 4 attributes, with Yi Qingshu's strength in the middle of the 6th level. However, she can definitely take the entrance exam to better universities like the 985. How did she come to Jiangnan University?" Bai Huanhuan. "You don't need to say it in her ear, I can hear it." Yi Qingshu felt a little helpless. She was originally going to Peking University, but unfortunately there was someone she didn't want to see there, which was why she came to Jiangnan University. As a few people were walking on the road, a girl with a hurried expression grabbed someone and asked, "Have you seen my Gu Wang?" After asking several people without finding out their whereabouts, she said with a sorrowful expression, "It's over. The Gu King is gone, he can't finish his studies." Just when she was in despair, a student from the breeding college walked up to her and took out a small jar, which contained a small bug. The girl was so anxious that she jumped up and wanted to grab the bottle, but the person moved the jar away and said fiercely, "This thing belongs to you, right? It ate the lingji that I've been growing for 4 years. Either you compensate me with the lingji, or I kill this bug, and then we both fail." At this moment, the senior turned to Tang Jianyue and said, "Look, I'll say Dan Xiu is the easiest." Tang Jianyue let out a and pretended to forget about the explosion just now. The senior sister who led the way didn't leave until she escorted them to the dormitory door. Bai Huanhuan, like Tang Jianyue, carried a suitcase, leaving only Yi Qingshu empty-handed. When she arrived at the dormitory, Bai Huanhuan asked her in confusion, "Qingshu, are you not carrying luggage?" Yi Qingshu pondered for a moment, then took a mustard bag from her waist and kept pulling things out from inside. Bai Huanhuan and Tang Jianyue stood still on the spot. "Okay, wealthy people, there's no way to compare." Bai Huanhuan couldn't help but slap herself, blaming herself for being talkative. Tang Jianyue silently turned around, as she had red eyes and couldn't bear to see these things. In the afternoon, the three of them had already packed their things, and then Bai Huanhuan suggested going together to pick up the books. It is said that there are many books to use in class, and Bai Huanhuan is ready to carry her suitcase. However, when Yi Qingshu saw it, she said, "Don't bother so much. If we're together, you can use my mustard bag." Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan almost hugged Yi Qingshu's thigh when they saw this, "Rich lady sister, hungry, rice." So the three of them went to the place where they received the books and saw a large stack of books held in the arms of others. They couldn't help but sympathize with them for a second. After Yi Qingshu took out her mustard bag again, she envied the whole room. For this, Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan were very satisfied, at least showing off their wealth should not only be about them. Returning to the dormitory, Bai Huanhuan eagerly flipped through the pages of a book, clearly excited about her first time attending college. Tang Jianyue pulled out a complete collection of medicinal herbs and felt lost in thought until she opened the first page and saw various spiritual medicines introduced on it. Her eyes suddenly became moist. In her past life, when she was in college, Zhou had to memorize medicinal herbs overnight at the end of the semester. How could she still learn these things in this world? Some dead memories began to attack her. Why, exactly why? Tang Jianyue is not convinced. Isn't this a world of spiritual revival? Everyone should not step on a flying sword and then point contemptuously at others before casually saying, "Garbage." Now it seems that the clown is actually herself. "Oh, Jianyue, why are you crying?" Bai Huanhuan leaned over and asked in confusion when she saw the tears in Tang Jianyue's eyes. Tang Jianyue forced a smile and said, "Perhaps it's because I have a deep love for this book and this subject." Standing in the corner, Yi Qingshu's ear twitched and she suddenly ran to the table to pick up a complete collection of talismans. No, she is the king of curses. She loves talismans, but she doesn't love them deeply. Is this why she has been losing to her childhood sweetheart all along? She has decided to love her profession as deeply as Tang Jianyue in the future. After nightfall, Bai Huanhuan pulled the bed curtain and said to Tang Jianyue and Yi Qingshu, "Good night, I'll go to bed first. Tomorrow's military training, I need to rest well." Tang Jianyue, sitting on the bed, was taken aback by military training. Why do cultivators still need military training? Sure enough, this is a world of cultivation that is both serious and unorthodox. To be honest, it's better not to wear it, at least graduating from the past won't inexplicably explode the furnace. Tang Jianyue silently looked up at the empty bed across from her. There were 4 people in a room, but military training was scheduled for tomorrow. Why hasn't the remaining roommate come yet? "Jianyue, what are you looking at?" Bai Huanhuan pulled open a corner of the bed curtain. Tang Jianyue pointed to the empty bed across from her and said, "Tomorrow's military training, why hasn't she come yet?" Bai Huanhuan yawned and explained, "She is said to be a foreign student who does not receive military training." Tang Jianyue envied again, so internationalized, and there are also international students. That's not it, it's said to be Hogwarts exchange student. Bai Huanhuan poked out half of her head, people say that England's system is a wizard, so will she fly on a broomstick? Tang Jianyue shrugged her shoulders, how did she know? After Bai Huanhuan finished speaking, she pulled the bed curtain and lay back down again. Late at night, Yi Qingshu lit the lamp and read at night, sticking a sobering talisman on her forehead. She wanted to kill everyone. There was a faint glow emanating from her bed curtain. Tang Jianyue fell asleep, but not completely. As soon as she closed her eyes, she saw the smiling old man again. Tang Jianyue froze her mind and said in one breath, "If you don't buy a card or register, you'll be penniless." The old man hesitated for a moment, but this time he had a painful thought and decided not to be led astray by Tang Jianyue. He forcefully interjected, "No, let me introduce myself first. I am Xianyan, the leader of the Chongqing sect." "Do you know about the Chongqing sect?" Tang Jianyue shook her head innocently. Xianyan took a deep breath and proudly said, "These are the 3 sects in the immortal world." Oh, Tang Jianyue remained unmoved at all. Xianyan preached again, "All right, let me give you a chance to become my teacher. As a teacher, I will definitely teach you to become the top 50 in the immortal world." Tang Jianyue said, "Oh. Xianyan. Shouldn't you be excited and kowtow to your teacher at this time? What is this girl thinking?" Tang Jianyue asked again, "Do I need to do anything?" Xianyan Lao Shen was stroking his beard on the ground, and then a scroll appeared out of nowhere in his hand, "As long as you finish this set of questions." Halfway through his words, he saw Tang Jianyue close her eyes again and say, "Goodbye." Sure enough, she knew it was for sales. Chapter 4 Salted Fish. After so many years, do you call me a genius? You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Tang Jianyue's consciousness left, several sounds appeared around Xianyan one after another. The most frequent sentence among them is, "Master, you lost your junior sister again." Xianyan pinched his eyebrows, and Tang Jianyue was the biggest obstacle on his road to apprenticeship. In the past, when he was in the cultivation world, he shouted loudly, who didn't rush to join his sect. What was the problem that made Tang Jianyue think he was a fraud? "No, we must bring Tang Jianyue into the Chongqing sect tonight." Just as he was about to pull Tang Jianyue's consciousness back, one of his disciples came up with an idea and said, "Old man, accepting apprentices is also based on sincerity. If you don't give me some benefits, how can you turn me around to junior sister?" Xianyan fell silent, feeling that his disciple's words were reasonable. However, he still said, "Xiao Lu, what did you call me just now?" "Old man." "Ah, no, master." After the last sentence, he remained silent. Xianyan snorted and thought about what to give Tang Jianyue. After thinking for a while, he took out a martial arts book that even the wealthy in the cultivation world couldn't buy. This little girl earned it. Xianyan once again pulled Tang Jianyue's consciousness back to its original place. Tang Jianyue yawned in displeasure, feeling extremely tired and unable to finish. "Old man, you're like this, I called the police." Tang Jianyue just finished speaking when she saw Xianyan hand over the martial arts to her. Xianyan said, "Good thing, master worship ceremony. How about joining our sect? This is yours." Tang Jianyue picked up the Wuxiang Heart Sutra, and glanced at it for a while, but was not very interested, so she put it down again. "No," she refused again. Xianyan was also stunned. After all, he really had no choice but to take Tang Jianyue. "Can you tell me how you can accept me as your teacher?" Tang Jianyue propped her head up for a moment and said, "Can you give me a job?" "Work? What is that?" Xianyan was puzzled and forgave him for being isolated from the world for too long. Just now, Xiao Lu, who was called Xianyan Old Man, couldn't bear to watch anymore. He couldn't help but sit across from Tang Jianyue in a figure and then show a seemingly friendly smile. "Junior sister, join us and invest without losing money," he said. Tang Jianyue saw him and looked at him. "You look much more reliable, unlike this old man who looks like a fraud at first glance." "Scammer." Xianyan closed himself up. If it weren't for something happening in the cultivation world, he would be a respected immortal. Senior brother Chu Su nodded in agreement and said, "When he wanted to take me as his disciple, I thought he was a fraud." Chu Su took off a ring from his finger and handed it to Tang Jianyue. "Here, the apprenticeship ceremony, take the ring. There's about a building inside, isn't there?" Mainly, your realm is too low. I'll give you even better ones in the future. Tang Jianyue pondered repeatedly, took the ring with both hands, and then shouted to Chu Su, Master. Any hesitation for a second is disrespectful to money. Yi Qing comes from a family of cultivating immortals, and now she only has one mustard bag, with a space size of just one room. This is a building. But after her master's shout, Chu Su was stunned, and Kong Yun was also stunned. Chu Su raised the corner of his mouth and pointed at Kong Yun, saying, "It's not me, it's him." Kong Yun pretended to be calm and stroked his beard. "That's right, it's by Lao Fu." This time Tang Jianyue finally didn't refuse and shouted, "Master." "Yes, there's a junior sister now," Chu Su smiled proudly. Kong Yun said, "You haven't eaten anything again. Besides, you're already an immortal and can still choke to death." Chu Su let out a dissatisfied tisk and said, "Master, it's been 500 years. You should at least learn about this world." Kong Yun is non-committal. He is an immortal. What else do you need to learn? But at least Tang Jianyue was left behind. Tang Jianyue joyfully put the ring on her finger and looked at Kong Yun puzzled. "Master, what did you just say about becoming an immortal? Are there any immortals in this world? Since you are such a tall and noble immortal, why do you still take me as a little useless person?" Kong Yun coughed lightly and explained, 500 years ago, the immortal cultivation realm collapsed. Alas, how can I tell you? It was the collapse of the heavenly Tao that led to the flow of spiritual energy into the blue star. Our sect gathered all its strength and escaped from the immortal cultivation realm. However, our current situation is a bit special. We are trapped in the void and cannot leave for the time being. We can only exist in your conscious space, and we can only communicate with you. Tang Jianyue raised her head for a long time, and then asked, "Why is it me?" Kong Yun said, "Our current special state can only be entrusted to the consciousness of people with spatial attributes." When he said this, Tang Jianyue became even more confused. "But Master, I only have fire attributes." "Did you find the wrong person?" Kong Yun took a test stone and placed it in front of Tang Jianyue, gesturing for her to put her hand on it. Then the test stone continued to sparkle with light, initially only a red halo on the surface, and then a silver one. Kong Yun saw the situation and said, "Look, let me tell you. You have spatial attributes." But then his words came to a sudden halt, as there was still light flashing on the test stone, which suddenly turned into black and white, and finally into a transparent halo. "Master." Tang Jianyue pointed to the stone and wanted to ask what the situation was. Kong Yun remained silent for a long, long time, and then looked at Tang Jianyue with a complex expression. "It turned out that I had taken a wrong look." "You're not a spatial attribute," he said. Tang Jianyue doesn't care, it doesn't matter. She's afraid that the old man will find the wrong person and take back the ring. But after Kong Yun finished speaking, he excitedly grabbed Tang Jianyue's hand and said, "Child, you are a genius." He said he wouldn't take his eyes off him. He had already said that Tang Jianyue's bones were unique and there would be no mistake. Originally, that sentence was just a casual remark, but unexpectedly it became a prophecy. Tang Jianyue pulled her hand back uneasily, feeling that this fate had played a huge joke on herself and the original owner. "Old immortal, I've been a fish for so many years. Can you tell me I'm a genius?" Kong Yun nodded excitedly and said, "It's not a fire attribute or a spatial attribute, it's nothingness." The so-dot called nothingness refers to all the attributes within her body, as long as they exist in this world. However, at the beginning, there are often only a few that appear, and only when her spiritual consciousness grows will she awaken the remaining few, otherwise her brain will explode if she awakens completely at the beginning. Tang Jianyue seemed to understand, but Kong Yun fell into contemplation again. In theory, the nihility attribute is the son of the heavenly Tao and the heir recognized by both heavenly Tao and Qi Yun. But Kong Yun had already discovered the Son of Heaven in this world over a decade ago. But at that time, there was a talisman on the person's body, and he couldn't pull their consciousness. How could there be two people selected by the heavenly way? Chapter 5. The Immortal Touches My Head. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. After learning that Tang Jianyue had a nihilistic attribute, Kong Yun couldn't even close his mouth and swore in his heart that he would cultivate Tang Jianyue to be at least the number one in this world. If Tang Jianyue knew what was going on in Kong Yun's mind, she might shout to let her go. What's wrong with her just wanting to be a spoiled danshio? Kong Yun opened the Wuxiang Heart Sutra and solemnly handed it to Tang Jianyue. Study hard, our sex hope is all in you. Like most parents in the world, Kong Yun is hoping to become a disciple of Jackie Chan. Tang Jianyue cleared her throat and asked Kong Yun solemnly, Master, I am a disciple of the Chongqing sect, right? Kong Yun nodded. Of course, he couldn't lose the genius he had finally collected. Kong Yun's expression was still a bit nervous, afraid that Tang Jianyue would turn back, so he quickly asked Tang Jianyue to kowtow to him and offer him a cup of tea. After completing all the procedures, Tang Jianyue sat upright and said, Master, since I am a disciple of the Chongqing sect, do you have to give me some self-defense tools? Otherwise, it would be a pity for a genius like me to die outside. Kong Yun nodded and felt that Tang Jianyue's words were reasonable. Just as he was about to send some magic tools out, he suddenly realized that he had been misled by Tang Jianyue again. He said seriously, a jade without carving will not turn into a tool. If the jade is broken, there will be nothing left, Tang Jianyue retorted. Kong Yun pondered carefully and realized that Tang Jianyue was of the third level. If we were to follow the standards of the cultivation world, she wouldn't even enter the gate of cultivation. In theory, some pills can be given to her, but as an immortal, Kong Yun wouldn't carry low-level pills with her, and Tang Jianyue couldn't take high-level pills. After hesitating for a while, Kong Yun left a genuine aura in Tang Jianyue's eyebrows. This aura will ensure your safety once, and also help you break through the third level faster. Tang Jianyue touched her eyebrows and wanted to say something more, but Kong Yun couldn't wait to release her consciousness, afraid that she would ask for something again. When Tang Jianyue opened her eyes, she sat on her bed with an extra copy of the Wuxiang Heart Sutra at hand. After flipping through a few pages, she couldn't resist the drowsiness and then lay down in bed to sleep. When she was unconscious, spiritual power flowed through her body, and the true qi in her eyebrows lit up. Together with her own spiritual power, she worked for 7 weeks in her body, and then her realm relaxed slightly, successfully breaking through the 4th level. Early morning. Yi Qingshu was washing up with a black eye circle, and Bai Huanhuan couldn't help but say, Sister Yi, this is only the first day. Let's not fight like this. Yi Qingshu shook her head and said, No, I must have a deep love for Fu Dao, and I must surpass Tang Jianyue. Tang Jianyue, who had just woken up, heard this and said innocently, No, I'm lying flat, really. Upon hearing this, Yi Qingshu and Bai Huanhuan turned their heads to see Tang Jianyue yawning. Yi Qingshu said, Look at you. The dark circles under your eyes are even heavier than mine. Did you secretly roll them up last night? No, Tang Jianyue said, yawning again. It wasn't because of the chaos caused by the Chongqing sect last night. Tang Jianyue felt that her spiritual power seemed to be a little more abundant today, so she closed her fingers together and her fingertips flickered with spiritual power. Yi Qingshu was at least several levels higher than her, feeling the spiritual power of Tang Jianyue's fingertips carefully. Is this the 4th level? It seems so, Tang Jianyue said. This time, Yi Qingshu was stimulated again and said, All right, Tang Jianyue, you said you didn't have any exam papers. Which good person doesn't sleep all night practicing? Even Bai Huanhuan widened her eyes and said, What's the situation? Are all the rolling kings around me? This will make me feel out of place with you. What's going on? Yi Qingshu lost in thought and looked at Tang Jianyue in front of her, then carefully at her face. Tang Jianyue, your surname is Tang. Otherwise. Tang Jianyue was unsure, so, is there any problem? Yi Qingshu asked again, do you have a brother or sister or something? No, said Tang Jianyue. She was an orphan in her previous life. After wearing it, the owner also has no brothers or sisters. Yi Qingshu didn't mention it, but when she mentioned it, Bai Huanhuan remembered something and said, but one of the major families of cultivating immortals is the Tang family. Jianyue, you can't be a member of the Tang family, can you? I don't know, Tang Jianyue pondered without hesitation. The Immortal Cultivation family is said to have had cultivators before the revival of spiritual energy, and even after the revival of spiritual energy, they emerged from the world and stood at the top of the world. However, there are so many people with the same surname in this world that it cannot be said that a single surname can determine whose family she belongs to. Just as the surnames of ancient royal families are also widely circulated today, anyone can directly claim to be a direct descendant of which emperor. Yi Qingshu thought for a moment and then said, that might be my mistake, but people surnamed Tang dislike it. Tang Jianyue said unfairly, your strike range is a bit broad. Yi Qingshu snorted. The annoying Tang family lineage was really annoying. She was on par with Tang Jianyue. Although she grew up under the guise of a genius, she had never defeated that Tang family lineage. Now I have encountered someone who doesn't sleep all night practicing. In summary, Yi Qingshu is at odds with someone surnamed Tang. Tang Jianyue felt that there was a big misunderstanding, but it wasn't her intention to stay up last night. Yi Qingshu doesn't believe it. Why did she reach the 4th level so easily without practicing? However, Tang Jianyue said seriously, last night I dreamt of an old man with a white beard who taught me the immortal technique and taught me the immortal way. You can just boast, Yi Qingshu said. How did you break through your realm? Tang Jianyue said solemnly, the immortal caresses my head, and my hair will grow and grow. Not to mention that Yi Qingshu didn't believe this sentence, Bai Huanhuan believed that Tang Jianyue was talking nonsense. Tang Jianyue is very helpless. To be honest, no one believes her these days. Before the three of them left, Bai Huanhuan placed her hand on Tang Jianyue's shoulder and said, Jianyue, what good luck. The immortal is pointing the way. Do you want this blessing for you? Tang Jianyue said. I dare not want to. Bai Huanhuan waved her hands, you can enjoy it alone. After the three arrived at the military training ground, many people had already stood there. Originally, each college was trained separately, but today is the first day, and it is said that there is a military training stage. Anyway, it's just for eye-catching bags to showcase their talents. Of course, there will also be some big shots inside. Before Yi Qingshu went to find her class, Tang Jianyue asked beside her, Qingshu, if it rains, will we still have to train? Anyway, when Tang Jianyue went to college in her previous life, she could go back to bed and sleep when it rained. Yi Qingshu looked at the sky and said, if it rains, it shouldn't be necessary. Tang Jianyue said, aren't you a genius talisman? Can you draw a rain-seeking talisman? As soon as she finished speaking, Yi Qingshu widened her eyes and looked at Tang Jianyue. Tang Jianyue, are you okay? Unless you are a master, there can be no large-scale rainfall. Moreover, there are spiritual suppressive stones on the military training ground, which are designed to stabilize the weather. Stable weather. Yi Qingshu sighed and said, it's like this. After all, we want rain, but senior students want sunshine to be bright. Then when we pray for rain, they pray for sunshine. Isn't that a way of fighting? That's why the school has placed a stabilizing stone for the weather. I can't handle the rain anymore. At most, I can give you a small dark cloud on your head. Chapter 6. Sword Cultivation. No, that's a eye-catching bag. You are listening at novelfull.audio. During the conversation, there were already many instructors on the training ground managing discipline. Bai Huanhuan and Tang Jianyue stood together. She glanced at the ring on Tang Jianyue's finger and sighed, "Jianyue, your ring is so beautiful." She didn't even think about the space ring. How could that precious thing be said to exist? Each class also sits cross-legged on the ground according to the prescribed position. Freshman students formed a big circle on the field, and an instructor stood in the middle of the field and snapped his fingers. Because he used some spiritual power, the sound of snapped fingers clearly reached every newborn's ear. Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan also stopped communicating and, like other freshmen, quietly looked at the instructor standing in the middle of the field. The instructor Lin seemed to be satisfied with the sensation of attracting so much attention. In order to make his image taller among the freshmen, he summoned his own divine sword and stepped on it, looking down at the surrounding freshmen. Tang Jianyue, with a black circle under her eyes, stared at him blankly and murmured, "Yes, that's the kind of garbage-looking look. This is the sword cultivation I imagined." Tang Jianyue had just finished sighing when a sword light suddenly rushed into the middle of the field and headed straight for Instructor Lin. Instructor Lin was stunned for a moment, then quickly dodged, but his body tilted and almost fell off the flying sword. The gaze of many new students turned uniformly towards the direction of the sword light flying towards them. At this moment, a young man slowly stood up among the new members of the sword cultivation team. He waved and recalled his flying sword from front of Teacher Lin, then said to Teacher Lin, "Sorry, my hand slipped." Instructor Lin almost didn't stand firm on the sword just now. He lost face in front of the new students before he had a chance to show off. Of course, he couldn't easily let go of the young man who had just slipped his hand. Besides, was that an apology from him? Who does he look down upon with such a dragging attitude? Bai Huanhuan pointed at the young man and said to Tang Jianyue, "Have you seen him? I see, this year's eye-catching bags and prickly heads have appeared." Tang Jianyue's mouth curved upwards. Bai Huanhuan helplessly raised her forehead and said, "I'm not saying that, I'm saying that his name is Duaning, a member of the Duan family, a renowned cultivator." As soon as she finished speaking, Instructor Lin approached Duaning with his sword and questioned him, "What is it called? What is your cultivation level?" Duaning, as for cultivation, in the later stage of the 6th level, it should be almost reaching the completion of the 6th level. Duan Ying's expression remained unchanged. He looks very ungrateful in that way. Instructor Lin originally intended to use him as a warning to others, but upon hearing about his cultivation, he silently retreated to his original position. Although he was a few levels higher than Duaning was from a family of cultivators, so it was better not to provoke him. Tang Jianyue glanced at Duaning a few times and asked Bai Huanhuan, "He's already in the late 6th stage, why don't he go to Jiangnan University?" Bai Huanhuan's expression suddenly became a bit strange. Duaning doesn't make many friends with others, and I don't know much about him. But I heard that in the theory exam, he got all the multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank questions wrong, and he didn't write any subjective questions. In short, he got 0 points in the theory exam. Genius, Tang Jianyue sighed. Bai Huanhuan was puzzled and said, "Why?" The college entrance examination in this world not only tests academic achievement, but also includes theoretical exams, where the sum of the two scores determines the final score. He was able to avoid all the correct options, indicating that he knew the correct answer and did it intentionally. "Isn't this a genius?" Tang Jianyue said. Bai Huanhuan felt justified upon hearing this and quickly took out a piece of paper from her bag to record it. "What are you doing?" Tang Jianyue asked. Bai Huanhuan wrote and drew on paper, saying, "I plan to join the school's youth media reporter team after military training. I need to take note of these news and speculations." Just as Instructor Lin was about to get to the point, he noticed a small black cloud in the crowd. He looked up and saw Yi Qingshu sitting under the small cloud, taking out a bottle of water from a mustard bag. "Who can't bear it? Are you here for military training or for spring outings?" So he walked over fiercely and said, "This classmate, please pay attention to the occasion and what is your name? I need to report your situation to your supervisor. Yi Qing Shu, in the middle of the 6th stage. Instructor Lin was stunned again, and Yi Qing Shu asked him, Instructor, should I take back this little black cloud? No need, you keep going, just don't affect others. Instructor Lin pretended to be calm and returned to the center of the field, but tears of bitterness streamed down his heart. Why have so many immortal cultivation families emerged this year? How can he be so handsome and how can he manage them? Without the trouble caused by Duaning and Yi Qing Shu, we can finally get to the main topic this time. Instructor Lin shouted on the flying sword, military training stage, if you have the courage, come. The talent displayed during military training is generally conducted voluntarily. However, there are still many people vying to go up. Those who succeed in being handsome can receive 4 years of priority in choosing a spouse, but there are also many eye-catching packages that directly lose the right to choose a spouse for 4 or even more years. Tang Jianyue silently counted, feeling that the interest in the sword training academy was the highest. Is there a higher probability of the eye-catching bag for sword cultivation? A burst of enthusiastic applause interrupted Tang Jianyue's thoughts. But as she expected, the one who came on stage this time was still a sword cultivator, Zhou Jingyi. Speaking of Zhou Jingyi, she has a strong connection with the original owner and Bai Huanhuan. Zhou Jingyi is the kind of arrogant sword cultivator who can't be any more arrogant, but she won't look at others with garbage-like eyes. Because she doesn't use her eyes to see people, she uses her nostrils to see people. She went up and danced a sword technique, and everyone who had seen it agreed. Tang Jianyue didn't sleep well last night and kept yawning, but she still mechanically walked the process, applauding everyone. But her yawning was seen by Zhou Jingyi with sharp eyes. Zhou Jingyi walked quickly to Tang Jianyue and said, Do you have any dissatisfaction with me? Tang Jianyue looked at her with innocent eyes and said, There's nothing. Zhou Jingyi said again, All right, you can also come up and practice a set of swordsmanship. Bai Huanhuan rushed to the side and said, Jianyu is Dan Xiu, not Jian Xiu. What kind of sword is she dancing with? Zhou Jingyi's expression revealed a hint of mockery, really. But I remember her first choice was sword cultivation. Besides, even Dan Xiu needs some talent. No, I won't, Tang Jianyue said. Zhou Jingyi was somewhat surprised by Tang Jianyue's reaction. Didn't she used to be the most face-saving person? What's going on now? Zhou Jingyi didn't give up and said, Anything you want. Tang Jianyue shook her head and said, I don't know anything. Zhou Jingyi got angry and said, No, Tang Jianyue, you don't know anything. Are you a waste? Tang Jianyue shrugged and said, Why not count it? Her reaction made Zhou Jingyi feel like she had punched cotton. But she was still angry that Tang Jianyue yawned while dancing with her sword just now. She must have done it intentionally. Upon seeing Zhou Jingyi's performance, Tang Jianyue knew what she was thinking, so she clapped her hand again and said, Your sword dance is really good. Zhou Jingyi sneered, Can you be more sincere? Tang Jianyue also gave face and sincerely praised, Wow, how impressive. Although it always sounds strange, Zhou Jingyi is still very happy. After all, this is the first time she has heard Tang Jianyue praise her. She is very useful. Just as she was about to leave, Tang Jianyue twisted her hands together and couldn't help but say to Zhou Jingyi, Wait a minute. I don't know if it's Tang Jianyue's illusion, but she always feels a bit excited when she calls Zhou Jingyi. But she didn't know what Zhou Jingyi was thinking in her heart. She came to find fault, I knew she would do this. Tang Jianyue observed Zhou Jingyi's expression for a while and then said seriously, Don't be so hot-tempered. Drink plenty of warm water regularly, otherwise you will age quickly. Suddenly, there was a moment of silence around. Zhou Jingyi's decibel suddenly increased. Tang Jianyue. Tang Jianyue covered her ears and said, Hey, I'm here. I'm not deaf, there's no need to shout so loudly. You see, after just telling you, you didn't listen at all. If you keep going like this, be careful not to get wrinkles. Tang Jianyue, are you polite? Zhou Jingyi tried her best to calm her mood. Sorry, I have an occupational disease. Zhou Jingyi remained silent for a few seconds, then couldn't bear it anymore and said, Tang Jianyue, can you have a sense of boundaries? Cannot. Chapter 7. Military Training Seeking Rain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The talent performance on stage can only be considered a hot show, and the remaining half of the day is the real training. The first day was relatively easy, but there were still complaints floating in the air. Some have already started praying for rain. It's just that after so long, I haven't seen a drop of rain. During break time, Tang Jianyue stood on a stone and looked at the people of other colleges from afar. Fu Xiu was drawing a talisman, and one of them exerted too much force. Rain did not come, but instead sent himself to the hospital. This is the blue bar gone, heart health bar. On the formation repair side, it was even more exciting. One by one, they picked up pens and drew gossip formations on the ground. The formations were already drawn, and a group of formation repairs sat around the edges of the formations, puzzled. How can it rain? Before they could figure it out, a whistle made them stand back in the line. Bai Huanhuan stood next to Tang Jianyue, and in her spare time, she caught a glimpse of Tang Jianyue's unusually focused attention. As the instructor turned around, she secretly asked, Jianyue, how serious are you? What are you thinking? I'm thinking about what to have for dinner, Tang Jianyue said with firm eyes. Bai Huanhuan remained dumbfounded, seemingly unable to adapt to Tang Jianyue's current way of speaking and doing things. People are iron, rice is steel, and the soul of rice is the soul of rice. Tang Jianyue's philosophy is to fill the stomach before doing anything. After going through all the names of the cafeteria dishes in her mind, it was almost time for dinner. Instructor Lin, who was stepping on the flying sword, shouted to disband in the air. Bai Huanhuan was about to sit down and rest when he saw Tang Jianyue already in a position to sprint. Just as Bai Huanhuan was stunned, Tang Jianyue reached out and pulled her behind her, then ran towards the cafeteria with her. Jianyue, what are you doing? Bai Huanhuan was startled. Tang Jianyue replied, of course it's dry rice. In her past life, whether in high school or university, Tang Jianyue was definitely the first person to appear in the cafeteria. She just missed one thing at this moment. That is the swordsmanship training of the Grand Four Imperial Swords. How can her legs catch up with those sword cultivators who don't speak of martial arts? When she and Bai Huanhuan arrived at the cafeteria, there were already several sword cultivators standing inside. Tang Jianyue suddenly felt a sense of defeat. But fortunately, the others didn't eat as quickly as she and Bai Huanhuan, and they both had a smooth meal. When Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan turned around holding plates, a long queue had already formed in the cafeteria. A large part of them are freshmen in military training. They saw Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan holding plates and their emotions were mixed for a moment. At that time, they looked down upon Tang Jianyue when she started running, but now they pay homage to her foresight. Questioning Yuejia, understanding Yuejia, becoming Yuejia, and even surpassing Yuejia the next time. Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan finished their meal slowly before preparing to return to the dormitory. In the evening, Tang Jianyue accompanied Bai Huanhuan to interview the journalist team of the school's youth media. The senior students who interviewed were all very satisfied with Bai Huanhuan. They needed this kind of obedient and knowledgeable elementary school girl. On the way back, it was already 9 p.m. Bai Huanhuan sorted out some information and put it in her backpack. At this moment, Duaning walked past Bai Huanhuan. Duaning. Bai Huanhuan immediately stopped him when she saw him. Duaning turned back in confusion and looked at Bai Huanhuan and Tang Jianyue with caution. What's up with you? Of course, Bai Huanhuan excitedly walked up to Duaning. Can I interview you? No, Duaning refused without even thinking about it. He turned around and wanted to leave, but was stopped by Huan again. Just one question: why did you intentionally fill in the wrong multiple-choice questions during the college entrance examination? To be honest, Tang Jianyue also wanted to know about this matter, so she hugged her arms and watched the play on the side. Duaning furrowed her brows lightly and raised her tail tone slightly, intentionally. Huan nodded and wanted to find a pen to record. Everyone says you are the new generation of Long Outyan. After all, you are the only one who has the courage to intentionally fill in all the questions incorrectly, Duaning. Long Outyan. Tang Jianyue raised her eyebrows as she listened to this familiar name, which was known as the exclusive name for male protagonists in the male-frequency cultivation literature 500 years ago. Unexpectedly, 500 years later, Long Outyan still stands firm. Sure enough, each generation has its own dragon pride. Duaning chuckled lightly and secretly clenched her fist, faintly hearing the crisp sound of her finger joints. Just as Huan was about to continue her interview, she was pulled by Tang Jianyue. Tang Jianyue sighed in her heart, "Silly girl, if you ask again, you will be beaten up. Can male leads be interviewed so easily?" Just as Tang Jianyue was about to pull Huan away, a large tree on the roadside broke off for some reason and smashed towards the direction where Tang Jianyue and the three of them were standing. Tang Jianyue and Huan were stunned on the spot, but they were not stupid yet. Their first reaction was to hold their heads. Duaning seemed to have been prepared for some reason, and with a sharp sword, he struck the fallen tree and then used a sword technique. The thick branches were chopped apart and fell at the feet of Tang Jianyue and Huan. Tang Jianyue was stunned for a second before thanking Duaning. At this time, Tang Jianyue was still very grateful to Duaning, but after she learned about him later, she swore never to thank him again. Huan also repeatedly said thank you. I didn't expect that although you may seem a bit aloof, you are still very kind. Duaning's expression flickered, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only let out a sigh and quickly ran away with his sword. Only leaving Tang Jianyue and Huan with a blurry silhouette. Huan pointed at herself and asked Tang Jianyue, "Are we that scary?" "Thank him," and he ran away. "It's like we're some kind of fierce beast." Tang Jianyue shrugged. Who knows what Duaning thought. When Tang Jianyue and Huan returned to the dormitory, Yiqingshu was already sitting in bed meditating. She heard the sound of the door closing, opened a small slit in her eyes, and saw that it was Tang Jianyue and the others. She silently reached out and pulled up the bed curtain, muttering, "I love the talisman loves me." Tang Jianyue stood in place for a while, then turned to Huan and said, "Is it certain that she won't go crazy like this?" "Anyway, Fu Xiu is a group of lunatics," Huan said. "Look at the one who begged for rain today. Didn't you just take yourself to the hospital?" Tang Jianyue, who had decided to let things go, naturally wouldn't compare her cultivation with Yiqingshu. She lay in bed early and then prepared to fall asleep beautifully. However, the heavens were not beautiful. As soon as she fell asleep, her consciousness entered that space again. Kong Yun, who smiled extremely kindly, waved and asked Tang Jianyue to sit down across from him. He coughed lightly and made a serious expression. "Jianyue, since I have already taken you to the beginner's level, I naturally want to urge you and teach you immortal techniques." Tang Jianyue was drowsy from listening to the next words, as if she had listened to the principal's speech in her previous life. At the end, Kong Yun said, "I see that you have a unique bone, so let's teach you swordsmanship first." "Okay," Tang Jianyue nodded subconsciously. After agreeing, she realized that there was nothing wrong with the situation. She questioned, "Master, I applied for Dan Xiu as my major." Kong Yun, as if he hadn't heard it, called his sixth senior brother Chu Su to Tang Jianyue and said, "Jianyue, follow your senior brother to learn swordsmanship well." Chapter 8. Wait, senior brother. I am Dan Xiu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After calling Chu Su over, Kong Yun left first, leaving only Tang Jianyue and Chu Su looking at each other. Tang Jianyue weakly raised her hand and said, "Senior brother, I am Dan Xiu." Chu Su nodded stiffly and said, I know. Master. Don't worry about him, the old man wants to be both an apprentice and a hands-off shopkeeper. Chu Su pulled Tang Jianyue up from the cattail. Let's go, I'll teach you how to practice swordsmanship. Chu Su led Tang Jianyue towards the depths of space, passing through a corridor bridge. The scenery in front of him suddenly became clear, as if he were in the midst of a fairy mountain. There are pavilions on the clouds, and lakes and fish in the mountains. Chu Su explained, this is the Chongqing sect. When the heavenly Tao collapsed, Master and several senior brothers worked together to compress the entire sect into one space. The two walked to an open arena, and Chu Su seemed to be thinking about how to teach Tang Jianyue. Tang Jianyue sighed and spoke out again, "Senior brother, I am a famous Dan Xiu. Is there anyone who can pay attention to her opinion?" "I know," Chu Su looked up, but his expression was a bit strange. "What's the point?" "Fourth senior brother is Dan Xiu. He should have taught you, but a few senior brothers are in seclusion. Now only I am a free agent, so master threw you to me." After he finished speaking, he thought it was Tang Jianyue who didn't like practicing swordsmanship, so he said, "Junior sister, swordsmanship is very good. Think about it. While others are running on the ground, you can fly on the sword and still look down at all beings with the eyes of ants. Do you want everyone to pay attention to you?" Tang Jianyue thought for a moment and said, "Good is good, but we all say that sword cultivation is poor. Senior brother, my dream in this life is to become a wealthy person." Chu Su gently raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Who said the sword cultivation is poor? I gave you the space ring in your hand." Tang Jianyue touched the ring on her hand and her eyes lit up. "So, senior brother, in fact, sword cultivation can also be very rich, right? Of course, it's not just that. Think about it. When you come to that stop with your sword, who dares not listen to you? Whatever you want, someone will obediently offer it," Chu Su said proudly. "It sounds pretty good, but senior brother, wouldn't someone beat you up for something like robbing families and houses?" Chu Su was slightly taken aback, but then retorted, "No, if you're strong enough, who dares to say no? So, may I ask to what extent you need to be strong enough to speak harshly like your senior brother?" Tang Jianyue looked at Chu Su with almost devout eyes. Chu Su cleared his throat and said, "That would naturally be like me, crossing the heavenly calamity and becoming an immortal. How long will it take?" Chu Su rubbed his chin and roughly estimated, "It's hard to say. Those with better qualifications will take a century or even 1,000 years, while those with average qualifications will take about 10,000 years. There will be a lifetime without crossing the heavenly calamity. Anyway, I don't think even the masters in your world are worth mentioning to us." As soon as Tang Jianyue heard about it, she began to feel tired. After so long, she didn't even know if her ashes were still there. But Chu Su, under the command of Kong Yun, must give Tang Jianyue to the church. Although Tang Jianyue repeatedly emphasized that she was a virtuous cultivator, Chu Su did not waver at all. Instead, there was a hint of pity in her eyes. "Junior sister, don't think about it. Master's intention is for me and my senior brothers to take turns teaching you, so whether it's Dan or sword, you have to learn it." Tang Jianyue took a deep breath and thought that she couldn't escape no matter what. She had to accept her fate and said, "All right, senior brother, I'll learn. Learn to learn, and in the future, you can still play handsome when stepping on a flying sword." Chu Su looked around again, seemingly searching for something on the ground. Tang Jianyue asked in confusion, "Senior brother, what are you looking for?" Chu Su picked up a branch from the ground and handed it to Tang Jianyue. "That's it. The most beautiful thing around, is it?" Tang Jianyue still looked at Chu Su with a puzzled expression. Unexpectedly, Chu Su said, "Take it, your sword." Tang Jianyue was stunned and looked at the branch in Chu Su's hand. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "Senior brother, using this as a sword is a bit shabby." Chu Su pondered for a moment and realized that it was indeed a bit shabby, so he threw the branch in his hand. Just as Tang Jianyue breathed a sigh of relief, Chu Su took a thicker branch from somewhere and the spiritual light in his hand flickered. The branch in his hand was carved into a wooden sword, which was an authentic peachwood sword. Tang Jianyue's hand when taking the sword was trembling. Chu Su just lightly patted her shoulder and said, "Don't worry, junior sister. In the future, when you learn how to find a good sword, senior brother will help you find a good sword." However, many times the divine sword and its owner are a two-way choice. A truly spiritual divine sword depends on fate. Tang Jianyue nodded bitterly. How could she not tell that Chu Su was drawing cakes for her? But based on the current situation, she can only swallow this big cake. "Senior brother, I'm ready." After Tang Jianyue calmed down, she prepared to practice seriously with her peachwood sword, constantly thinking about scenes of being handsome in the future. "Very good." Chu Su nodded satisfied and then led Tang Jianyue to a wooden man, saying, "Tonight, if you don't practice too much, let's first stab this wooden stake with a sword 100 times, and then swing it 100 more times." Tang Jianyue dared not set up a channel and said, "How much?" "Senior brother, how much do you say?" 200 times in total." Chu Su's expression remained unchanged. At this point, Tang Jianyue could only grit her teeth and wield her sword 50 times before suddenly thinking of something. Chu Su suddenly stopped her movements and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Tang Jianyue sighed and said, "Senior brother, I still have military training tomorrow." Chu Su paused for a few seconds before saying, "Is there any way not to go?" Tang Jianyue shook her head and said, "We can't go unless it rains." Upon hearing this, Chu Su sneered and said, "That's not easy." For him as an immortal, calling out for wind and rain was just a matter of moving his fingers, but just as he finished speaking, he suddenly remembered that he couldn't act casually in the world of Tang Jianyue, otherwise he would inevitably be targeted by the heavenly Tao of her world. Back then, when his master transferred the Chongqing sect, he had already acted against the heavenly Tao. But the words had already been spoken, and Chu Su pondered for a moment. After searching through the space ring for a long time, he finally found a rain-seeking talisman with a lower level. He handed it to Tang Jianyue and said, "This is for you." It was a defective picture drawn by senior brother Wu a long time ago, but it is already at the level of a great master or above. Take this and it will definitely rain tomorrow morning. Chu Su gave this talisman paper with conditions. Since Tang Jianyue can rest tomorrow morning, it means she has to continue wielding her sword tonight. Later on, Tang Jianyue couldn't remember how many times she had swung her sword. It wasn't until dawn that Chu Su released her consciousness. When Tang Jianyue opened her eyes, Bai Huanhuan and Yi Qingshu had already woken up. Bai Huanhuan saw Tang Jianyue's tired face and said, "Jianyue, you've been sleeping all night. Why are your dark circles still so heavy?" Tang Jianyue yawned and rubbed her arms. If possible, she also wanted to sleep well. She took out the rain-praying talisman given by Chu Su and walked to the window. As Bai Huanhuan and the others were leaving, she called out to them, "Wait, don't go today." Yi Qingshu asked, "Why?" Tang Jianyue smiled slightly and said, "Because it's raining today." Yi Qingshu walked to the window and saw that the sun was shining brightly and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. She said, "It doesn't seem to rain at first sight. You said it rains when it rains. Is it possible that the Dragon King's palace is owned by your family?" Chapter 9. Rain-Seeking Talisman. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sorry, it's really from my family. Tang Jianyue smiled slightly, holding a rain-seeking talisman between her fingers. Fuji. Aren't you Dan Xiu? Yi Qingshu asked. Tang Jianyue smiled but remained silent, injecting spiritual power into the talisman paper and then throwing it into mid-air. There was a 3-second silence. During these 3 seconds, Yi Qingshu thought a lot, and Bai Huanhuan also thought a lot. They didn't know what Tang Jianyue was doing. Until 3 seconds later, the sky was filled with lightning and thunder, and dark clouds piled up. Yi Qingshu looked into the air in shock, roughly estimating the rank of the talisman. Did it really rain? Bai Huanhuan reached out the window, her palm touching the raindrop with a frightened expression. The people under the window were busy finding shelter from the rain, and there were many cheers. The cheers immediately indicated that they were freshmen. Rain means taking a break. At this moment, in the eyes of Yi Qingshu and Bai Huanhuan, Tang Jianyue was like a deity. This is still unknown to the other freshmen, otherwise they will definitely find a place to confess Tang Jianyue. Yi Qingshu's attention was focused on the talisman paper, and she roughly inferred that talisman paper can only be drawn by a great master or above, Tang Jianyue. Those who can be called great masters are all above the 9th level. She was about to ask Tang Jianyue where she got this talisman paper, but on second thought, everyone has their own secrets, and she couldn't ask too much. Coincidentally, Bai Huanhuan also thought the same way, so both of them remained silent in agreement and did not mention the matter of praying for rain again. Tang Jianyue was very satisfied with the strong wind and rain outside. She lay back in bed, covered herself with a blanket, and fell asleep happily. Yi Qingshu is very puzzled by Tang Jianyue's behavior. She has a preconceived belief that Tang Jianyue is a rolling king. Why is she sleeping all day and not enough? The key is that even so, her spiritual power can still break through. Can she practice in her dreams? No, she must be confusing me, I can't be fooled. So Yi Qingshu gritted her teeth and continued to roll up a complete set of talismans. When Bai Huanhuan saw Yi Qingshu in the afterglow, she somehow felt that the corners of her eyes were also shiny and moist. Qingshu, did you cry? Yi Qingshu shook her head and said, No, I'm thinking about what I can do to deeply love my profession. She couldn't understand why Tang Jianyue had such a high level of consciousness. Sure enough, the people of the Tang family dislike it. Yi Qingshu had previously speculated that the rain-seeking talisman was painted by a great master, but it rained for 3 consecutive days. It seems that this is not something that the great master can do, so she has been sitting by the window pondering these days. Bai Huanhuan asked her, and she only said that this talisman must have been drawn by an advanced master. It rained for 3 days, and Tang Jianyue also slept for 3 days. Except for getting up to eat, the rest of the time was spent in sleep. This also puzzled Yi Qingshu and Bai Huanhuan, wondering why her sleep was so good. When Tang Jianyue woke up and was preparing to eat, she happened to hear Yi Qingshu say something about entering the ranks. She was just a novice who had just worn it for a few days and really didn't understand anything, so she had to ask Yi Qingshu, a genius who came out of the cultivation family. Yi Qingshu looked at Tang Jianyue with a deep meaning in her eyes, wondering whether she really didn't understand or pretended not to. She held the talisman drawn by Master Zhang Jinjie in her hand and asked herself what it meant to be a Jinjie. Is this decent? However, Yi Qingshu still explained, according to the division of strength, those above the 7th level are called masters, and those above the master level can wield the sword. Most graduates from key universities are at this level. The Grand Master is above the 9th level, which is a bit rare. From 1st level to master, as long as the talent is still decent and not slack off, it can generally be achieved. But if the Great Master wants to continue his journey, he will have to overcome the thunder robbery. After overcoming the robbery, he is known as an advanced person by everyone. There is also a distinction between advanced and advanced levels, but advanced is already the lifelong pursuit of most people. Tang Jianyue nodded clearly and then asked Yi Qingshu, what about the immortal? As soon as she spoke, Yi Qingshu's expression became somewhat strange. The immortal is about to cross the heavenly calamity. The ancestors of the Yi family said that a long time ago, the cultivators on the blue star could cross the heavenly calamity and go to the real cultivation world. However, in records, there are very few who can reach the level of immortal. At least for nearly 1,000 years, there has never been any immortal, and the traces of immortals are hard to find. Yi Qingshu's gaze showed a strong longing. Xianyan, a realm that she couldn't even imagine. After Yi Qingshu's narration, Tang Jianyue realized later that the inconspicuous old man Kong Yun was really impressive. Even my junior brother Chu Su is an immortal. No wonder Chu Su always looks at others with the same eyes as ants. This is because ordinary people are like ants in his eyes. Sitting by the window, Yi Qingshu propped her chin and let out a sigh. Oh my, if I could get a signature from the immortal in this life and touch his Taoist robe, I would die without regret. Bai Huanhuan also sat next to Yi Qingshu and said, "Me too." Yi Qingshu said, "It would be great if that immortal was a sword cultivator. I really want to touch his sword. If it were a talisman cultivator, I really wish I could kneel down immediately and beg him to accept me. Even if I were an external disciple, I would be willing to do so." Bai Huanhuan said, "Me too." After she finished speaking, she suddenly saw Tang Jianyue looking at her with a strange expression on her face. She coughed a few times to ease her embarrassment and said, "Well, I hope that the immortal is a Dandao. Just show me his pills and I'll be satisfied." Tang Jianyue muttered helplessly in her heart, "It's really a drought death, a flood death." Yi Qingshu seems to be able to get along well with Bai Huanhuan on this topic. Finally, the two of them clasped their hands together and prayed, "Please grant me an immortal from heaven, just take a glance." Although Yi Qingshu made such a wish, she also knew how difficult it was to meet an immortal. Even if she did, the immortal probably wouldn't even give her a glance. Tang Jianyue saw Bai Huanhuan and Yi Qingshu so devout, and began to fall into self-doubt. Why does Xianyan feel that her cheap master and handsome senior brother are not so reliable when she is such a tall and sophisticated person? Just as Tang Jianyue was pondering, someone was knocking on the window. Yi Qingshu, who was sitting by the window, opened it and saw a sword cultivator standing on a flying sword hanging outside. Just as she was about to ask, the swordsman flipped through a box on his sword and handed it to the window. "Miss Bai Huanhuan, your takeout has arrived," he said. The three people in the room were stunned, and Jian Xiu hurriedly left after placing the boxed lunch in Yi Qingshu's hand. Rain comes, rain goes. Tang Jianyue silently turned around. Sure enough, cultivating immortality is cultivating immortality. Even delivering takeout is so high-end, it's still given by the imperial sword. This is not several orders faster than ordinary people. That's right, it looks a bit shabby. We're all masters now, and we also need to use swords to deliver food. Yi Qingshu seemed to know what Tang Jianyue was thinking. She explained, "There's nothing we can do. Who makes swordsmanship expensive? Half of our wealth is already in it, and we have to spend money to find tools to repair it, and it's really difficult to find Dandao to buy medicine." Chapter 10. Magic Cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tang Jianyue thought that the entire military training could be fooled through under the protection of the rain-seeking talisman. However, the senior management of the school urgently held a meeting. According to tradition, during the last week of military training each year, new students are taken to participate in practical training. But for some reason, it has been raining non-stop this year. Someone suggested finding a high-level expert to drive the clouds, but the dean suggested directly advancing the training date. So on this day, Tang Jianyue could only walk to the playground with three people, Bai Huanhuan and Yi Qingshu, holding a big umbrella. There were still many people carrying backpacks on the playground, but Tang Jianyue and the others were able to move forward without the burden because of the generous wealthy woman Yi Qingshu. Before departure, Yi Qingshu generously opened her mustard bag and asked Tang Jianyue and Bai Huanhuan to put their things inside. Tang Jianyue looked at the small planes in front of her and said, our school has so much money, how can we get so many planes? Yi Qingshu didn't pay much attention. What is an airplane? Only a flying boat is considered valuable. Tang Jianyue chuckled and said, okay, she doesn't understand the world of wealthy people. The three of them arrived at the playground relatively late, and when it was their turn, there was only one helicopter left. Instructor Lin said awkwardly, the number of people was miscalculated, but the helicopter can also be used. You three can make do with it. The helicopter was indeed able to sit, but it wasn't until the three people got in that they realized Duaning was also there. When Duaning saw Tang Jianyue and the others, his heart was also confused. He had already told Instructor Lin that he was sitting alone, so why did he run into them again? But as the matter came to an end, Duaning couldn't say anything more. She just moved her body inside quietly, keeping a certain distance from Tang Jianyue and the others. Is Jianxiu so proud? Yi Qingshu pursed her lips. Instructor Lin jumped onto the helicopter and signaled to the pilot that he could leave. The driver hesitated for a moment and said, Platoon leader, are you really taking them with you? Instructor Lin nodded and said, don't worry, they don't know. Tang Jianyue didn't know who Instructor Lin was talking about, but there was always a feeling of unease in her heart. She attributed this feeling to Instructor Lin, but it doesn't seem very reliable. Halfway through, Tang Jianyue asked Instructor Lin, Instructor, where are we going for practical training now? Lin Jiaoguan said, a small secret realm under the name of a school, remember to train well there. After you officially enroll, there will be a test. Take advantage of the secret realm and improve your strength. At this point, the journey has already passed halfway. If nothing unexpected happens, there will be an accident. The passenger plane flies at the front and the helicopter flies at the back. Bang! The helicopter felt like it suddenly hit a wall. Tang Jianyue looked out but didn't see anything. Yi Qingshu's eyes were guarded, it's a barrier. The driver turned to look at Instructor Lin, but his eyes were full of vigilance. How could it be? How would the people of the demon world know we brought it with us? Just as Instructor Lin repeated the impossible, several sword-wielding demonic cultivators suddenly appeared around the helicopter. Several people inside the helicopter immediately turned their gaze to Instructor Lin. Officer Lin's face turned red, but now is not an awkward time. The top priority now is how to escape. It's really unlucky. Instructor Lin cursed inwardly, and the imperial sword flew out of the helicopter to engage in a fight with the several demonic cultivators. Tang Jianyue took the opportunity to ask the pilot, so is there anything on the plane that attracts emotion? The driver nodded, and even the magic repair was stuck in front of him, so there was nothing to hide. He said, Instructor Lin was ordered to escort a herb, but who knew the news leaked and was targeted by the demon cultivator. Instructor Lin struggled to fight against several people alone, and besides, Mo Xiu was indifferent when fighting. A magic cultivator shot a sword light that hit the tail of the helicopter. The driver was also on the 8th rank and immediately climbed up with a sword. Tang Jianyue, who was falling down, glanced at each other and they were all speechless. The nobility of wielding swords, right? What about these little vegetable chickens? Instructor Lin couldn't spare any time for now. The driver was about to go and save Tang Jianyue and the others when another sword light shot at them. Yi Qingshu immediately threw a defensive talisman. But after all, she was only at level 6, and that sword light still destroyed the plane. Bai Huanhuan was so scared that she hugged Tang Jianyue. Duaning took a deep breath and remained highly focused. Tang Jianyue noticed that Duaning was very nervous and thought he was just afraid of death, but soon she knew there was another reason. Instructor Lin and the pilot in mid-air were scared to death when they saw Tang Jianyue and the others falling down. Especially if there are two people from the cultivation family among them, what should they do if something happens to these two precious ones? Just as Instructor Lin was preparing to go down to save someone, a vortex suddenly appeared beneath Tang Jianyue and the others. Like a black hole, it sucked a few people in. The driver's face changed and he said, "Not good, it's a space crack." Instructor Lin never expected a spatial crack to appear here. The space around the secret realm is indeed unstable, but if the crack appears without any warning, the probability is roughly equivalent to encountering a tornado while walking on modern streets. However, this is both good news and bad news for Tang Jianyue and others. The good news is that they won't fall to the ground and turn into meat patties, while the bad news is how they get out. After several people landed safely, they carefully observed the surroundings. Yi Qingshu took out a compass from the mustard bag and explored it, revealing a bitter look behind it. Duaning asked her, "Where are we now?" "Not very good." Yi Qingshu's expression was serious. "We are at the border of the demon world." As several people looked at each other, Tang Jianyue suddenly spoke up and said, "What is Mo? Forgive her for being just a little pitiful newcomer, she really doesn't know anything." Yi Qingshu has become accustomed to the inexplicable problems she sometimes encounters. Some cultivators may not have enough concentration to choose to become demonic, but not all demonic practices are bad. Some people simply go crazy and become demonic after going crazy. Duaning touched the hilt of his sword and said, "But it has to be said that being a demon cultivator is quite enjoyable. You don't have to follow the rules. If you want to go crazy, go crazy." Hee hee. Yi Qingshu sneered, "As long as the demon cultivators who are not on the pursuit list have not committed any crimes, they are generally very safe, but those who are on the blacklist should be careful." "Why?" Tang Jianyue asked. Yi Qingshu said, "There is a bounty, and some people will go and catch it, especially during the final week. Some sword cultivators' graduation thesis is to catch a magic cultivator." Bai Huan thought for a moment and said, "Actually, sword cultivation is quite difficult. First of all, it's poverty. Secondly, graduation is also difficult, especially for sword cultivation in the ruthless path. Every time he graduates, he and one of the disciples of the Hehuan sect will fail." The only sword cultivator on the field, Duaning, couldn't listen anymore and silently walked forward. Ahead is a forest covered in mist. A few people had just walked to a river when they saw a young man covered in blood lying on the ground. Bai Huan was about to approach and check when Tang Jianyue stopped her. A few people looked at Tang Jianyue, but she just said indifferently, "Don't pick it up casually on the roadside." After pausing for a few seconds, she added, "From experience, there's no good ending after picking it up."